Milwaukee Bucks wrap up a 6-0 homestand and get a small measure of revenge against the Orlando Magic. And Giannis erupts for 37 points, though we saw 3 straight games of under 50% shooting. But still, Bucks just a half game out of first in the Eastern Conference. We'll dive into what we saw tonight and some trends maybe that we're starting to see. I'll run those past Frank as we recap win number 6 on the homestand on today's Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia. You can hear me on the Bucks Radio Network. He's Frank Madden, the founder of Brew Hoop, longtime host of the podcast. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and viewable as well on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Frank, the Bucks beat the Magic. It wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing game that we've seen from the Bucks, but a perfect 6-0 homestand. And Adrian Griffin pointed out after the game that we're finding different ways to win, which this was kind of a throwback to some of those games they were winning earlier in the season. But there is some measure of importance to that this team isn't just blowing teams out with their offense.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Locked On listener Brennan. Brennan was sitting right behind me tonight when I went to go to the game with my daughter and my wife, and he kind of leaned over. I think it was maybe after the first quarter. Brennan kind of leaned over and was like, "Are you Frank Madden?" I was like, "I am," and longtime listener, and we were chatting a bit. I think I agreed with most of the stuff Brennan was saying as we were talking a little bit about kind of big picture Bucks and everything, and I think one of the kind of takeaways is it does feel like this team, and I think some of Giannis's comments after the game echo this, is that it still feels like a team that is, offensively kind of getting by on talent to a large extent. We did see some more Giannis staying pick and roll late in the fourth quarter. Giannis should have had a monster dunk off one of those and uncharacteristically biffed us multiple dunks in this game, so something might have been that foot that's been bugging him a little bit or something. But 37 points later, I guess can't complain too much about Giannis's performance. But yeah, it is a kind of just still there. I feel like this homestand, I mean, 6-0 was the goal, right? Like in the macro sense, like you really wanted to rack up all these wins with a road trip coming up. Couple games in New York against the Knicks, a team that's obviously a pretty good team that you've beaten a couple times, and then some road games after that. So again, if you're going to be figuring stuff out, and like I said, especially defensively, I think this team is just sort of like fundamentally sort of less than the sum of its parts right now. Not that they are a team that should be the number one defense in the league or something like that. But we saw this Magic team tonight, right? I mean, this Magic team has been one of the best defensive teams in the league this year. And, again, I'd say they have some better perimeter defenders for sure that they can throw out there. But it also just feels like, again, the kind of point of attack defense, especially in the first half, the Magic kind of got wherever they wanted in the pick and roll. And it seemed like every shot, I mean, unless Brook Lopez or Giannis blocked it at the rim, it was going to be a layup. And the Wagner brothers were particularly problematic in that first half. So, the Magic they've been a very good team this year. They've had some losses of late, but super talented. And we saw them obviously beat the Bucks once before. That was granted without Dame. So yeah, it's just kind of a weird game. It felt like they really locked in a bit in the third quarter. I thought the Magic going to Paolo over Franz actually really played into the Bucks' hands to a large extent. And that's really when the Bucks kind of built their lead. And, again, you'd love it if they just sort of mashed the turbo button and kind of won by 20 points or something like that. And true to first half of the season Bucks form, they made it more difficult on themselves probably than it needed to be. But I don't know. There was also just kind of the typical steadiness, and they made the plays they needed to, including some plays defensively, in order to win the game. So yeah, glass half full. It's kind of my refrain of late is like, if you can kind of continue to just grind out wins, especially against a pretty good team like this
Yeah.
win, the Houston game. I mean, Houston's another team, kind of similar, young team, very good defensively. Again, not works of art. You're not going to say like the Bucks proved that they're ready to win a championship or something like that. But at this stage of the season, a third of the way through, there are definitely worse places to be than 21-7, and whatever they are, like a game behind Boston
Half
for
game,
the
yeah.
best record. Yeah, half game behind
Yeah.
Boston for the best record in the East. I mean, if you're going to be a work in progress and not really playing up to your potential, there are worse places to be. So yeah, how you see that glass, your mileage may vary, but it's almost Christmas, Justin. So I'm trying to be more of an optimist.
Well, and this one felt differently too, because you mentioned the throwback to the first handful of games this season, the first 15 or so games where the Bucks routinely made things more difficult than it should be. This one never really felt like it was going to slip out of reach. It felt like, despite some of the issues, they were pretty well in control, unless the Bucks just totally squandered this game. Now, granted, a big part of that is the struggles the Magic have offensively and the fact that they are not a good three-point shooting team. And even in the first half, if two of those three-pointers fall, it's a much different story. So they're bailed out by that. But that, in that sense, it did feel much differently that in comparison to some of the other games that we've seen this team grind out, as Griff has pointed to, there wasn't, or just, at least for me, there didn't seem to be the same level of anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple plays that I kind of wonder in the third quarter. Bucks get a fast break. I think they were up 82-67, and MarJon throws the lob to Giannis. And I saw one replay in Arena. I don't know if you got a better look at it, Justin. I didn't really.
I didn't
Giannis was
see
complaining about a
anything.
foul. I didn't really
Yeah,
see
I
much
didn't
of
see
anything.
anything.
So I don't know what I mean. Giannis kind of blows the dunk. That I think that would have put them up 17
Mhm.
instead. The Magic turning around and hit a three pretty much immediately, going back the other way to make it 82-70. And from there on out, like the lead sort of slowly shrunk a little by little, to the point where I believe it was a 2-point lead, I think, maybe midway or
Yeah.
early-ish stages of the fourth quarter. And I think Franz Wagner had a three look to take the lead at one point
Yeah.
and missed it, because that's what the Magic did tonight. They missed a crap ton of three-pointers. What were they, 6 of 28 or something horrendous? And yeah, I mean, fortunately, we've seen, right, the Bucks have some luck. I mean, overall their 3-point luck has been pretty much average. They haven't been like a lucky team in
Yeah.
that regard. Magic, actually, especially early in the season, they had a lot of 3-point luck that was buoying their defensive numbers. But yeah, I mean, the Magic aren't a good 3-point shooting team, and the irony, Paolo has been a lot better offensively than Franz so far this year. Franz, I think, came into the game at 29% from three, but Franz was the guy that it felt like kind of could get anywhere he wanted. And especially in that first half, Chris was guarding him, and then we'd see switches, and bottom line, like, just seemed like small dudes were guarding Franz Wagner a lot, and he pretty much ate all those small defenders up. The way he covers ground, and kind of his angles and shot making and craft in the paint, I thought was really impressive. And it just felt like anytime the Bucks got put into a pick and roll, a defender would be on Franz Wagner's backside, and just could not do anything. And it would just be a 2-on-1, and felt like Brook Lopez's rim protection stats got banged up a bit tonight with a lot of finishes around him. But yeah, again, the 3-point defense, quote unquote 3-point defense, they didn't go in, so yay for that. And I don't know. I mean, again, still, I'd say they're not where they need to be, and that was pretty much Giannis's, I think, the primary takeaway from his comments after the game. I was just reading Gabe Stoltz from Brew Hoop. Shout out to Gabe. posted kind of a long quote from Giannis to that effect, and it was basically like saying, I don't really care about our record. 21-7 that's good, but that's not what we're trying to be, right? We're not trying to have the best regular season record. And he was kind of saying like sometimes we got it, sometimes we don't. But it's still going to take a while, is what kind of I think Giannis's main takeaway was. And I thought we saw it, right? The pick and rolls late, a couple of them, it seemed like Giannis kind of caught it in the middle and just kind of like froze and like didn't really know how to attack. And then the one where it was a little bit more coming from the side and was almost ended up being like an empty side pick and roll where he should have just hammered it for a huge dunk and just somehow rimmed out the dunk. Just I hate to say it was that kind of night because he had 37 points, but
third straight game though where he shot less than 50%.
Yeah, and like there was like one catch and shoot three, but a couple others, like there was that one with like 3 or 4 minutes left where he just dribbled up and had a
where Orlando had sliced the lead to I think like 7 or 6 at that point, where it was still very tenuous of you gotta value these possessions here.
Yeah. And I don't know, I guess my in a weird way, like maybe if he keeps missing these late threes, maybe this will just continue to tell him not to shoot threes, because he has limited his 3-point attempts this year, relatively speaking. But yeah, I mean, again, like I'm not gonna go too hard in on Giannis on a night when obviously he put up just a massive stat line and had a really fast start, which was encouraging. I was very nervous leading up to this afternoon, because I was like, man, this is my only chance to see the Bucks over the holidays. And he was questionable yesterday with this foot sprain. And then this morning he was listed at probable. I was like, okay, I think it's safe to get tickets. But until he was, ruled available, I was like a little bit like, okay, am I going to take, my daughter to her only Bucks game of the year, and Giannis is going to be in street clothes? But she told me she was like, she seemed to be happy just to see Giannis. So if he had been just on the sidelines, I think she would have been relatively okay with that. But she was definitely happier. She was wearing her Giannis shoes, had her Giannis purple jersey, so she was ready to go. And it ended up being a good, happy result for her. At least she's not as worried about the Dame Giannis pick and roll chemistry at the age of 5 as the rest of us are, or the defensive scheme. So Bucks win. That was her main takeaway, and she slept on the car ride back. So she's sleeping well tonight. The rest of us, again, we can kind of pick at some of the things maybe we didn't love about this game and some of the things that we've been seeing for the first couple months of the season. But 21-7, I believe I was checking kind of the previous year records through the first third of the season, because now we're just past the third mark, right? 27 games, basically a third of the season. And I believe they were 20-7 last year as well. And then the only other year where they had a better record under Bud was 1920, which was just the incredible year. They were 24-3. They were 52-8 at one point, right? That was just an insane year in terms of just dominating the regular season. So yeah, record-wise, hey, they're on pace for basically 60 wins right now, and I think where they actually end up is going to be a good little test of the idea of Pythagorean wins and point differential and a lot of the things that would say that they've been lucky. So we'll see, especially with the less home favorable schedule, some more difficult games coming up.
Yeah.
Again, hopefully they can kind of rise to the challenge, and hopefully some of this is them kind of playing down to their competition, because I believe they're now 10-4 against teams above 500, which is basically there are only 3 teams in the league that have been that good against 500 and above teams, and it's Boston, Minnesota, and the Bucks. So that's maybe another glass half full thing, Justin, is the fact that they've actually had a really good record against good teams. So another notch in the belt tonight against an up and coming Magic squad.
And they'll get 2 more cracks at that in their next 2 games too, with the 16-11 Knicks, and maybe, I know the Pistons have 2 games with the Nets, so probably a game with the Pistons, who are an above 500 team as well. So I do have some defensive things and defensive metrics to throw past you and get your thought on. I talked about it a little bit on the post game, and it's interesting when you examine the defense as a whole, it doesn't look great. We look at the numbers since November 3rd. It looks better, but there's some other things that stand out as well. So I want to throw that past Frank when we come back. This episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by BetterHelp. It is a stressful time of year for a lot of us out there with the holidays literally just around the corner. Christmas just a couple of days away. The stress behind finding the perfect gift, what to get somebody, or anything that goes into the holiday season, traveling and figuring that out, family members coming to stay with you, and the stress that can be added there. It can be a very trying time for us all, and BetterHelp is here to help you through any of that or any other stressors that you have in your life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible. It's suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. You can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. In a season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right, Frank, we've talked a lot about defensive metrics for this team, and I think there's the easy narrative, and to be clear, I'm not trying to say that this team, hey, they're a great defensive team and they're have the makings of a top 10, but there's the easy narrative.
It's the 86 Bears is what you're saying, Justin Garcia. Just put the quote up. The Bucks are the 86 Bears.
They're close to it. Maybe they're the 2001 Baltimore Ravens is more like it. But there's the easy view to say, hey, they're the 20th rated defense. Like, this team's got some problems. If we keep going back to that November 3rd date, and like at this point, I don't think that's cherry picking, because it's 24 out of 28 games that it's taken into account. It's all been in succession. There's one big impetus for that change that you can point to say, well, it's not just schedule. They did some things differently. And in those games after tonight, I think they're 14th or 13th in those games played. But the way we've seen teams grouped in there, and I think the other tough part for people is we're accustomed to a certain number for defense, and you have to adjust that to say, well, those numbers aren't going to be the same anymore. It's not like 100 is what you're shooting for, just over 100. The Bucks, there's not a whole lot of separation between where the Bucks are since November 3rd and even the 10th rated defense. So they still have a ways of work to go there. But I mean, you're talking about maybe 2 games you piece together here where, hey, this defense has figured things out. And before you know it, they're knocking on the door of a top 10 defensive rating. I still think there's a lot of work to be done. I think you feel the same way as well. Anybody that's watched this team all season long is going to have that opinion. But they've been much more consistent. And Adrian Griffin keeps talking about the fourth quarter being critical and the final 5 minutes have to be your best. It's not a massive jump, but the Bucks defensive metrics have gotten better in the second half of games as well, where they're closer to the top 10 there. So it's these little steps forward that they are taking, but it's going to be imperative to turn those little steps into larger steps and much more consistent steps in the second half, especially when the schedule gets much more difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like there's different ways to obviously, like I think we've all, you and I and Camille and certainly everybody that follows the team close, like we've all sort of tried to look at the numbers and figure out like what's symptomatic of like the underlying issues, like what are they doing better or worse, et cetera. Their shot charts, so like where opponent shots are coming, is quite good, right? I mean, like the rim percentage numbers at this point are pretty much the same as last year, maybe like ever so slightly up, but still really good in terms of not allowing a lot of shots at the rim. Their 3-point the percentage of shots from three has gone up a bit, but it was actually very good last year. I mean, kudos to Bud. Like the helping less paid off a lot. They had a pretty pristine shot chart in terms of just they squeezed a bunch of shots from 3-point range into the mid range last year, and a lot of that has stayed. I mean, you compare like their shot chart this year versus like 2 years ago during the Bud era, it's better now than it was. So I think the problem is not like the distribution of shots so much. I think the kind of other things that they're doing is they're basically kind of losing on the margins, right? The transition defense in the aggregate has been much worse. Now it was a freaking car crash in the first couple weeks of the season,
Yeah.
like historically like horrendous. And now it's gotten to just like kind of mediocre bad. And like tonight they did overall the number that kind of we always look at, this cleaning the glass thing, basically says like how many points were added through transition over 100 possessions, right? Because you can look obviously at just sort of pure fast break points, but that doesn't always kind of tell the story. But I think tonight it might have even been negative. Like basically the Magic did not add anything basically through transition versus their half court offense. And so I think like, honestly, like for me, a lot of this, like, there's kind of like two things, right? For me, it's like, and Zach Lowe always talks about the low hanging fruit and how Mike Budenholzer, his strength was basically just like taking that low hanging fruit, which again may seem like kind of an insult, but I know Zach always prefaces it by saying it's not an insult. There's a lot of value in the low hanging fruit. Mike Budenholzer is 2-time coach of the year and won a championship, right? So like the defensive rebounding, right? I think tonight it wasn't bad at all. I don't recall. I think the numbers are pretty good tonight, but obviously there have been a lot of games where the defensive rebounding has been a problem, and it has not been at the kind of elite level all season that kind of we've gotten used to over the past few years. And that's an area where, look, I don't think Drew Holiday is the reason why they were an elite defensive rebounding team. They were an elite defensive rebounding team with Eric Bledsoe too. A lot of that I think is mindset and what you prioritize. So I think defensive rebounding, if they can get back to a better place there, just be disciplined in transition, right? Like to me, this is where like coaching and mindset and like honestly, some of it's like tactics, but some of it's also just like getting dudes to buy in and just like freaking get back, right? Like sprint back on defense, even after a make, like wake up, like just think every team is the Pacers in that regard, right? And just clean that up. So I think just some of that stuff, if they do that, rebounding and transition points, like they can be an average defense just by doing that at a higher level, right? Their free throw rate hasn't been bad this year as much as, I thought we all thought like, oh, maybe with Griff wanting to be more aggressive, they're going to foul a ton and give up a lot of free throws. It really hasn't happened. So that's a good thing. Problem is the turnovers, right? Like the whole point of a lot of the scheme was, Griffin wanted to force turnovers, create easy baskets and transition the other way. Hey, good news is they haven't even needed easy baskets. They've been a bad transition team, and it hasn't even mattered. Like Giannis's transition stats are way down, and he's still scoring 31 points a game efficiently because he's been so good in the half court. But I think like there's some stuff where it's just like, hey, just like do basic stuff. And then I think the other piece is just, it's like I just like you can't. And again, I hate to pick on Malik Beasley because he's been a really good value signing and he's done everything that you would expect of Malik Beasley. But this is, I think, why so many of us have been latching on to Andre Jackson, previously MarJon Beauchamp. Pat Connaughton we saw is the fifth guy in crunch time for a while tonight. Pat, despite missing some early threes, ended up, I think, contributing pretty well tonight, 8 points, 8 rebounds. But it's just like there's got to be like you got to give me something that passes the eye test defensively to close games, and it's not Dame, Malik Beasley, and Chris Middleton being your 1 through 3 guys defensively, right? Like I just don't think that's your solution. And look, the trade deadline is still whatever it is, 7 weeks off. I guess it's getting closer. But that's kind of the part that I'm still sort of wrestling with as well. I think if they were, winning these games late and Andre Jackson or MarJon or Pat Connaughton was out there like looking like a more competent defender, then I would feel a little bit better. Like, okay, like there's something more like sustainable, repeatable. Like this makes sense to me. But it is a weird situation because the starting five with Malik Beasley has put up awesome numbers. And they haven't even been bad defensively. Like they've actually have like pretty good defensive numbers too. And it's really when you get into the bench units that a lot of the defensive numbers, kind of the wheels come off. And, I thought Bobby had a pretty struggle-rific games. That's not a word that anybody's ever used before. But Bobby, I think it was like a -18 tonight, and it felt like a lot of the just meat grinder pick and roll stuff was targeting him. And so, again, like what you do about that. I mean, sometimes obviously I think Griff, the way he's used Bobby, like a lot of times it's been more aggressive. I'm fine with that, to be honest. But at some point, like Bobby just has to hold up, be able to play defense. And again, I think this team just really struggles with just keeping guys in front of them. And that's, not just a Bobby problem, that's a guard problem too, in particular. So, yeah, I think long story short, like, hey, I hope the defensive numbers continue to trend in the right direction. But again, like there's going to be a cap on how good they can be if they, again, just sort of leave some of this easy stuff out there and don't take advantage of some of the things that we know they can do well, because this group was good at it under Bud. And I don't think, again, there's any reason why they can't be good at defensive rebounding or just getting back on defense.
Yeah, a couple of things that you brought up there, I do want to touch on a little bit more. The transition and the bench play tonight, especially, were a couple of things that stood out. We'll get into that after the break. And today's episode is thanks to our partners, I should say, at Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. So instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. If you want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, you can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. They even offer a reboot policy, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks, the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. It's easy to play. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnba and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/lockedonnba and use that code LOCKEDONNBA, and they'll match your first deposit up to $100. The bench play, Frank, you mentioned, it certainly matched the eye test. When you saw some of the plus minus numbers that were coming out, it's not the be all end all, and it's not the measuring stick for how good. It doesn't tell the whole story, I suppose, but it matched everything tonight, where Bobby Portis had been so good for this team during the homestand. Wasn't the case tonight for some of those issues that you pointed to. He was effective on the glass and had a few of those moments. I think he had 5 offensive rebounds in this game. But that's when the Magic really started to make that charge. Was Cole Anthony and Mo Wagner were huge for Orlando. Jonathan Isaac doing something I don't think we'll ever see happen again, of one player blocking Giannis 3 times in a game. Their bench took over and brought them back in the game. And that's kind of been a season-long thing for the Bucks, is they're still trying to find that footing for the second unit, which, again, not to pick on Malik Beasley, but I think that's another reason why you've heard more chatter from people of, would it make more sense for him to be on the bench to have that scoring boost coming from that second unit? You'd gotten it from Bobby Portis of late. It didn't come tonight. And I think the other thing that stood out too is we only saw Andre Jackson Jr. for 7 minutes, and I don't think any of those came in the second half.
Yeah, and unfortunately, -8 in 7 minutes. I pointed this out on Twitter the other day in the context of, I want Andre Jackson playing more minutes. So to be clear, I want Andre Jackson to continue to get minutes, continue to get burned. But even just pointing out that, like, his on-off numbers suck. And even when you look at his numbers with Dame and Giannis, like, there's some of it's because he's played, with some bad bench units. But, like, I mean, he was like barely break even with Giannis and Dame and like good players too, which, again, I think for Andre, he's really a guy that needs to play with those star players, because, again, he's not trying to shoot or do anything offensively beyond just kind of pass and be a connector and then work hard defensively. So yeah, it was interesting to see him, not get a whole lot of run. But I mean, credit to MarJon too. I mean, they were really struggling in the second quarter offensively, and things that kind of really felt like they were in the mud in that regard. The Magic went to a zone. It was like the Bucks were struggling offensively, and then the Magic went into a zone. It was like, come on, man, can you just let us try to figure this out against your man-to-man defense? And then they went into a zone, and it felt like the Bucks kind of got thrown for a little bit even more of a loop. But credit to MarJon, he hit a three pretty quickly after he came into the game, and then he had a huge dunk on Jonathan Isaac, who we know is obviously a great shot blocker given what he did against Giannis. And MarJon even tweeted after the game that some people were saying he can't jump off 1 foot. This guy. I feel like I'm the ringleader of pointing out when MarJon slows down to jump off 2 feet. So I don't know if my message got through to MarJon, but the interesting thing was he went off his right foot too, right? Normally, obviously, a right-handed player, your left foot is your dominant leaping foot, and he actually jumped off his right foot to dunk on Jonathan Isaac. So that was great to see. There were a couple other plays where, and MarJon, can we get him those little wrist strengthening things? You squeeze. People on YouTube can see me awkwardly doing squeezing motions, but man, anytime the ball's in his hands, I just expect him to get stripped. I don't know. It just he just does not have strong hands. I'm not gonna say he's at Thon Maker baby hands levels or something like that. I'm not gonna go that far, but it just seems like he struggles so much. Normally it's when he's driving to the basket, he gets stripped a lot. And tonight it was, there were a couple, I think, occasions where he kind of tried to recover loose balls and just couldn't quite do it. But still, he was a minus for the game, but I thought he actually gave them a little bit of a boost in that second quarter. And it's interesting. I mean, I thought the other night when we saw Andre, I thought, oh, it looks like Andre is taking MarJon's minutes. And so I thought it was a bit interesting that tonight MarJon got in first, and I believe he got in first. And I mean, again, he played 11 minutes. Andre played 7, so not a huge difference. But Pat got 21 minutes, and I think Pat's probably now got a bit of a target on his back from Bucks Twitter, because now he's kind of taking some of those Andre minutes. So, and I get it, right? Pat's obviously not had a great year last year. Obviously, really struggled to kind of get on track with his shooting after the injury to start the year. Had a great series against the Heat, but whatever. Nobody cares too much about that given the result. So I don't know. I hope Pat starts to hit those corner threes again. Tonight he missed all 3, but he hit 3 other shots. Had a nice little cut late, and Dame found him off an inbound. I think he had another 2-point play that he finished off. So kind of was doing some of the dirty work. And again, he's going to be an obvious guy. People wonder well, why is that guy playing when we want to see our Andre minutes? But again, obviously we know kind of what Pat can do, and hopefully they can find minutes for both. I think the interesting question, Justin, I wanted to ask you was, so they signed Cam Payne, I think, and I can't remember. Can't remember if Camille and I talked about this the other night, but I know Cam shot the hell out of the ball to start the year. I'm not excited about Cam Payne minutes these days, Justin. And it feels like they often come, they're usually the first half of the second quarter and the first half of the fourth quarter, because that's, Dame plays the first and third full quarters. Yeah. And then it starts to tonight when Giannis was also resting to start the fourth quarter. It was basically Chris and kind of mostly bench unit. And it was man, it's feeling a little bit rough out there. And so I kind of was curious, because I mean, Cam, they barely even got him before, because of the opening up the roster spot.
Yeah.
So most of the summer they seemed content to just not have a second point guard.
Yeah.
So that's sort of one of the things that I've been thinking about is if Cam Payne, whatever, pulls a calf muscle or something for a couple weeks. I mean, I don't think anybody's expect. Yeah,
tonight you wondered if is he going down here?
Yeah. So I'm just really curious, because it seemed like they were going to come into camp okay with the idea of just not having basically a backup point guard, and presumably saying okay, well, Chris and Giannis can facilitate and we'll just live with that. So I am really curious if Cam did miss time, and who knows, right? With his legs getting taken out. He can stay in the game, but oftentimes we'll see guys play through something and then miss a game or two. And especially for the playoffs, I mean, are they really going to play him like 13 minutes a game in the playoffs? Like I could see him just not playing at all potentially. And I think that's where Andre also becomes interesting because look, Andre's not a point guard, but can he help break a press? Is he a connector on offense? Can he, dribble when the team's in a pinch? Yeah, he can do that, right? So I that's the other kind of piece with Andre that I find intriguing, not because he's going to be the backup point guard, but because he does have maybe a little bit of that sort of connective tissue type of, basketball IQ and ball handling ability. That maybe that could be, a part of the funky lineups that we might see if Cam missed some time. So I don't know like what to do with that, but I do sort of wonder, is there a scenario in the playoffs where Campaign maybe just doesn't play at all and we just see a lot more of Andre?
That was the first thing my mind wandered to when I can't remember who it was for Orlando that dove for the ball and got into Cam's leg, but when he went down, you immediately thought, oh man, whenever it's a loose ball and it's somebody diving on the floor and you take out the legs, not that it was a malicious play, but it's always, I don't know about this. And the first thing I wondered too is like, so I would assume Andre is the guy that takes his minutes then if Campaign can't return or if he's going to miss a game or two on this upcoming road trip. You could say Chris or Giannis or whatever to that point of who's going to run the offense. But I think part of it too is you had this plan of here's how we're going to use guys and here's how we're going to stagger them. And then that all changed after 15 or so games when Dame said, no, I'd rather play all of the first and third quarter. So that's kind of also exacerbated things to the minutes issue that you pointed to in some of those Campaign minutes of, well, we got to play him here because we got to get Dame a couple of minutes of rest in these spots.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been surprising to me how well it seems like the offense can still function, without Dame. And I give Giannis a lot of credit. There have been a lot of stretches where Giannis has just been able to, carry the offense, which, in truth, I think especially last year, he really wasn't able to do that. Like they really were not a good offensive team, especially when he was out there without Drew or Chris. And again, like now I think the idea, especially once you get to the playoffs, you're going to have two of those guys on the floor at any given time. So you're going to have kind of that playmaking ability from two of the three guys, at all times. But especially with the regular season here, I mean, as much as Chris's minutes have ticked up, he played 29 minutes tonight. I mean, I don't think they're going to be looking to play him,
Much
35
more.
to 37 minutes very often, right? So he'll probably be, again, closer to that 30-minute mark is what I would anticipate. But the flip side is it has been interesting as well, though, seeing Giannis's minutes sort of steadily ticking up as the season has worn on. He played 37 minutes again tonight. How much is that foot injury, this mid-foot sprain that was referenced? Like how much is that potentially impacting him, at least on the margins a little bit? Like, him missing 2 dunks, like obviously he's relying on that physicality so much that, you take away 15%, like, yeah, it's material. So we'll see. I thought, especially when he was questionable yesterday, that he might sit out this game and, they rest him up for those 2 New York games. But, credit to him. He came out flying in transition and, it hit a number of mid-range jumpers tonight, which was good to see, like a glasser, an angled glasser, which I feel like we never see from him in the first half.
First shot of the game. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, hit a little short hook shot late in the fourth quarter when, they were really kind of needing a basket. So, yeah, again, Giannis, this kind of felt a little bit more like what we had gotten used to from Giannis over the past month or so in terms of him really being the engine of the offense. And Dame, weird game from Dame in the sense that, he was 5 out of 17, but, he shot the 3 well. Yeah, 4 out of 8 from 3, but 1 of 9 in terms of inside the arc. But what was it, 6 free throws on 2 fouled 3-pointers in the fourth quarter, I think.
Yeah.
And so 10 out of 10 from the line again. So again, that ability to, again, just use your savvy and craft to get some cheap ones, like.
And to that point about the shots inside the arc, visibly frustrated about the whistle he was not getting throughout the course of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mo Wagner blocked him late in the fourth quarter at one point, and Mo was chirping at his own bench, and it was just like, all right, I'm very much looking forward to the Bucks winning this game.
Also stared down Giannis in the first half.
He's just an agitator. I mean, honestly, it's like, he is basically their like Bobby Portis in a weird way. He's like bizarro.
Dave Kane, yeah. So that we brought that up on the radio of like, so he's basically Orlando's Bobby Portis, right?
I mean, Bucks fans will like recoil in horror at that suggestion, obviously. Bobby is not a like flopper like Mo is, but yeah, I mean, in terms of being kind of like, I've lived in a little bit of that like agitator type of thing and being kind of the efficient, bench guy. I mean, incredible value they've gotten from him. He's been really good, and man, I mean, it's not just the Bucks. Like I've watched enough Magic games that he does this. Like he has these, really efficient game. 21 points on 10 to 15 tonight. He was plus 23 in 27 minutes. So in the 20 minutes he was off, they were minus 27. So Wendell Carter, 21 minutes, minus 27. So basically they staggered those two exactly. And Wendell Carter, who's just come back recently from injury, let's just say good things happened for the Bucks when he was in the game. Bucks got off to their fast start when he was in the game, and whenever Mo was in, it just felt like whatever the pick and roll game that Mo and Franz worked on growing up in Germany was working pretty well for them tonight.
Well, a 6-0 homestand, and as we said, the overall here is there's still a lot of things to work on and improve, but I mean, there's much worse places to be, knowing we still got to keep building than half game back of the Boston Celtics for the best record in the Eastern Conference and potentially all basketball as well. A 6-0 homestand, and now they head to New York for a week with 2 games against the Knicks, 1 against the Nets, and then off to Cleveland for a banged up Cavaliers team. So again, this upcoming road trip has a lot of winnable games, and that's going to be important to just keep getting those wins as you're going through this process of building that chemistry and figuring things out, because that schedule does get very different or very difficult a couple of months from now. What, in like mid-March, early March is when things really start to shift. So winning these games is certainly important in the interim. Any final thoughts on this one tonight?
Just shout out to Lisa Byington and Marcus Johnson. They let Tilly and me come into the broadcast booth at halftime. Tilly said she would have rather seen the voices of the Bucks, Dave Kane and Justin Garcia, and I said,
I doubt that very much.
I was like, I got to talk to Justin later. Like, no, we're gonna go see Lisa and Marcus. No, Lisa had pinged me a year ago because Lisa's been on the pod, and and a year ago I posted a picture of Tilly and I going to a game over Christmas, and she was like, hey, next time you're at the game, let me know, and you guys can come in the booth. So so she was very gracious in letting us hang out for a minute there at halftime, and Marcus came in and took a picture with us, and I was explaining to Tilly that Marcus was Giannis before Giannis was Giannis, and so he said, I believe Marcus said like, I'm mini Giannis, shorter Giannis. So he didn't deny it though. I appreciate that. Like Marcus didn't try to downplay how big he is, but yeah, she enjoyed it. It was a trip for her because of course she hears them on TV broadcasts, which I'm always watching at home, and she sits and watches a fair number of those. So she was into it, had her Giannis purple jersey on, and made some signs, some Go Bucks signs before the game. She was mad though, Justin. No shot, like the only thing. Well, no, she's really into the game, but she desperately wants to get on the jumbotron during the games, and she's super into it. She'd made little like signs, little signs that said Go Bucks, and she was like waving it at every timeout, dancing and trying to get on thing, and was just like so disappointed that I was like, why am I not on this jumbotron? And I was just like, hey, I've been to like 200 games, I've never been on the jumbotron. And granted, I'm also not a cute 5-year-old kid, but anyway, so I told her there were like 18,000 people there, and she was like, whoa, 18,000 people. I was like, yeah, so it's hard to get on the jumbotron. So Bucks, if anyone from the Bucks, game day game ops staff is listening, find us next time we're at
They
a Bucks
do,
game.
by the way. Yeah, I mean, if I would have known, I knew you were in town. If I knew you were at the game tonight, you could have been on the jump.
We could have made a dream come true. But you got to have the BMO card. Apparently, they like be shown on the jumbotron. So anyway, a dream deferred. Maybe next time.
Next time for sure. Well, Camille and I will be back with a live show on Christmas Eve, which I realize that's Sunday, and we've committed to live shows on Sundays. But nonetheless, we'll be back with a live show on Christmas Eve, and I think Camille and I are going to do the post game for the Bucks and the Knicks on Christmas Day. So we'll get a lot of New York Knicks. So it's the Bucks and their kryptonite of
but no Mitchell Robinson. No Mitchell Robinson.
No Mitchell Robinson, but still the Bucks versus early games. Name a worse duo out there. We'll wrap it up there. The Bucks 6-0 on the homestand and now off to New York to celebrate the holidays. I couldn't think of if you can't be at home, a better place to be than in New York for Christmas time. I know the team is very thrilled to be spending a week in New York. So that's what's on the schedule for the Bucks. For Frank, I am Justin. We'll wrap things up there. And Camille and I will be back here talking to you on the live show on Sunday morning.